Hey everybody, welcome back to Garage Band Guitarist. Today we are taking on another set of chords that are very important in this kind of guitar playing. You encounter them all the time. They're called the Sus chords, S-U-S. And we're getting close to the end of the course now, actually. We've only got a couple more lessons of new material left, and we'll have a couple others with songs in them, of course. But we're getting down there, and we're getting close to you having the kit that you need to be in a guitar band. So this is a very important lesson because these chords come up a lot, and they're used in lots of different interesting ways in this kind of music that we're playing. But I also am going to talk a little bit more about muting strings in this lesson as well. We talked a little bit about muting earlier, particularly when we were talking about the D chord and how when you play a D chord, you don't want to play the lowest string because it's an E, and there's no E in a D chord. And so you've got to either skip that one, which is one way of handling it, but also you can block it from playing by putting your thumb over the top and just letting it rest lightly on the string. So then if you accidentally hit it, it doesn't make the chord sound terrible. That's muting, okay? And so in some chords that we play, we have to mute some strings just because of the way the chord is set up. And there's a couple in this sus chord lesson that are like that, and it'll just help us have a little bit more of an intro to that notion of muting strings, okay? So that's what we're up to in this lesson. I want to remind you that there's a chord chart with all the chords that I'm going to cover in this lesson in the description link. So it might help you to actually go ahead and print that out. Click on it, it's a PDF. You can print it out and have it in front of you while you're going through this lesson. It'll probably make things easier for you to be able to take a look at that instead of just depending on the chord charts that I put up on the screen as we go along. Okay? Now, let me start off by just talking a little bit about sus chords, S-U-S. What is a sus chord? It's not sus in the sense that kids these days use sus to mean something is suspect or there's something wrong or that you have to be careful because something is not quite right about something. It's not suspect. The sus in music stands for suspended, okay? And these kinds of chords are suspended in kind of two senses, okay? The first one is that when we form this chord, we're going to take a note out, we're going to suspend using that chord, and we're going to put a different note in place of it, okay? That's what the suspended kind of means. So in a major chord, for example, we've talked about this, you have the root note, the 1, you have the 3rd, and you have the 5th, okay? Those are the 3 notes that make up a major chord. What we're going to do in the sus chord is we're going to take that 3rd out, and we're going to put something else in, okay? So we're replacing it, and so that's the suspension in the sense we're suspending the use of the 3rd in the chord, okay? That's kind of like what we did when we made minor chords. We took out a note, the major 3rd, and we replaced it with the minor 3rd, okay? So we actually swapping out notes. Same thing with these sus chords. We're swapping in something else for the 3rd. We're getting rid of the 3rd. That's unlike the 7th chords, you'll remember, where we added an additional note onto the triad. We had the first, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th, and then we added the 7th in addition. So we still had all the original notes, and we added another one on top of it. So there were 4 notes in the chord. Okay, that's not the case with sus chords. We're still only have 3 notes because we're going to drop the 3rd and replace it with something else. Okay, all right. So that's the first sense of suspended in these chords. The second sense of suspended. It's kind of the feel of the chord, okay? It's like we're kind of suspended in midair and we're going to come back down. It's really a chord that has a really temporary feel to it. It's driving you on to something else. It makes you want to resolve to something else. So when you go to a suspended chord, you're going to have this feeling that you got to move on to something else, all right? And so, so just for an example, you may know the song "Take It on the Run" by REO Speedwagon, and they go at the beginning. They go, "Heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another. You've been messing around." And here comes a suspended chord. Yeah, it makes you want to go to that chord really hard. So you could never end a song like that. It's calling you to do something else. Okay, and Foreigner has a song that starts off just like that, and they go. And that when you go up to that suspension. Feel that tension? It's like you got to go somewhere else. You're not going to stay there. Right? And so that's that feeling of suspension in these kinds of suspended chords. Okay? All right. Let's start with our first suspended chord. Okay? It's the sus4 chord. The sus4. This is far and away the most common kind of sus chord, the sus4 chord. And so what's happening in that, won't be any surprise to you based on my little preamble there, is that you're going to take out the third and you're going to replace it with something else, and that something else is going to be the 4, okay? So you've got the first, the third, and the fifth, and you're going to take out that third and you're going to replace it with the next note up, the 4. Okay, and so that's what it's going to be. Instead of 1, 3, 5, it's going to be 1, 4, 5, and that's going to be the sus4 chord. Okay, this chord is so common that sometimes people don't bother saying the 4. Okay, you'll hear people just talk about a sus chord. Play the sus chord. Okay, they mean the sus4. When they say that. Now, I'm not going to abbreviate it that way because there's another sus chord that's used fairly commonly we're going to talk about, the sus2 chord, and we want to keep those two things differentiated from each other. We want to make sure you know which one you're going for. So we're not going to do that, but I just wanted to cue that to you. If you hear somebody or they ask you to play a sus chord and they don't say 4 or 2, they mean 4. Okay? It's just another abbreviation for that. All right. The most common of the sus4 chords on the guitar is the D sus4. Okay, that's how we write it, D sus4. Okay, and the D sus chord I was playing in those two examples I gave you a minute ago, but it is used all the time because it's the primary sus chord you'd want to use when you're playing in the key of G. And so when you're using those chords in so many of the songs we've looked at, the G, C, and D, well, the D sus chord gets used a lot with those. So you kind of have this kind of thing a lot. You know? And then you start over or something. But so that D chord gets embellished with the sus. Okay? And you hear that constantly all the time in this kind of music that we've been learning in this course. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the construction of this really quick. And I'm just putting back up this string of intervals and how they map onto the D, the key of D. Okay, how they map onto the key of D. And so you could see, and you've seen this before, but it just tells you what the unison note is, the minor third, the major third, the fifth, the sixth, everything. minor seventh, major seventh, so on. It's all laid out down here, and I just want to use that to show you how this sus chord is set up, okay? So in the key of D, we have the first, the third, and the fifth. That's the major chord, and that's the D that we've learned, and that's, okay. The notes in that are the first, the third, and the fifth, and so if you look at this chart right here, you'll see that D, that's the root note, and then F sharp is the third, right? The major third, because we're playing a major chord, and then the fifth is A, okay? So that's the triad for the D major chord. Now we're going to make it into a sus4, so what are we going to do? We're going to get rid of the third, the F sharp, and we're going to put in the fourth. And you can see on the chart here that the fourth is a G note. It's a half step above the major third, okay? So that's what we want. We want a D, a G, and an A, right? That's our new chord that we're trying to construct. All right, so let's look at the chord chart for this and see how we play that on our guitar. So just remember, first of all, our D set up here. Okay, you probably have that down pretty well by now, but you can see on the chord chart that the last note there on the highest string, that's the F sharp, that's the 3, that's the third, that's the one we got to get rid of to get to the sus chord. And then we want to add a G, right? So how can we get that? Well, the easiest thing to do to get that is just to put your pinky down on the high E string there on the third fret, right? So just above where you had the F sharp being played with your middle finger, you put your pinky there, and you've got the sus, you've got the D sus4. Okay, you can leave your second finger, your middle finger down if you want to, or you can pick it up. It doesn't matter. You get the same sound, obviously, but a lot of times people just leave it there, unless they're going to do something else with it. But you can just keep your hand in the D position and pop your pinky down, and you get the sus4. Easy to go back and forth between those two. All right, so that's the D sus chord. We got the D sus4 chord. We've got the D sus4 chord down. All right, now we're going to do some more sus4 chords in a second, but let me do the other one with D first, as long as we're here, and it's really easy to get to from our D chord, just like that one was. It's very easy, so let's go ahead and do that. Now back to our chart just for a second here, make sure we understand what note we're going to put in. We're taking out the third, we're taking out the F sharp, and we want to put in the second instead, the major second. What's that note? Well, you can see right there, it's one whole step above D is the second, 1 is the D, 2 in the D key of D is E. So that's the note we want to add, is the E note. So our chord is going to be D, E, A. D, E, A instead of D, F sharp, A, which is the major triad, okay? D, E, A, all right? Now how do we get an E moving away from this major triad chord that we had, the D chord? Okay, got to get rid of that F sharp and get an E. Well, it's really, really easy because we have our open E string up here, our high E string. That's the note we tune that string to. And so if we just play that open, we'll have a D sus2 chord, okay? D sus2. And so you just pick up your middle finger there, just pick it up off of the string and play that string open. And that's your D sus2 chord, okay? Easy. And that's one of the reasons why people like these chords so much, because they're so easy to play, and why D is so popular to do them with, because it's so easy to play, the D sus4 and the D sus2. And in fact, people are always putting them together. They'll okay, And there's even joke. I mean, it's so common, and so it's almost a trope because people do that so much. People make jokes about guitar players. Guitar players can't play a D chord without doing the. And so you know, it's kind of become, you know, overplayed, I guess you might say, in some ways. But I think it's a great thing to have in your repertoire, and a nice little way to embellish the D chord sometimes. So it's not, you're not just sitting there strumming away. You know, you can throw those in and make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, so that's the D Sus4 and the D Sus2 chords. Okay. All right, so now let's go and do them with some other keys. Instead of D, we can have other kinds of Sus4 and Sus2 chords. Let's go to A. Let's play an A Sus4 and an A Sus2. And these are very easy, just like the D one is, and they're very, very similar to them in terms of how you play them. All right, and you will recall that this is our A chord, and I'm gonna. We learned a couple different ways to do that with 1, 2, 3 on the strings, like this is here, but we also learned it with just playing it with one finger. But let me use the one with the 3 fingers right now to demonstrate this, okay? All right, so what we have here is our A chord, A major chord. And again, we need to replace the third. And so if we look at our little chart here again, but change it to A, we'll see that the major triad, the first, the major third, and the fifth is A, C sharp, and E. That's the 3 notes in the major triad, the major chord in A. Okay? A, C sharp, E. Okay? So the third is the one we got to get rid of to get the sus chords. Okay? So we're going to drop out that C sharp, and to get a sus4, we need the note right above it, the fourth, which is a D. Okay, and where can we get that in our A chord? Well, our C sharp, we're playing with our ring finger, our third finger, on the B string, on the 2nd fret. That's a C sharp, and so one up from that would be a D, right? Okay, so we want to get rid of the C sharp, and we want to add the D. And so that's how we do it. Just, you have your 1, 2, 3 fingers in position there, and then you just drop your pinky down on that B string and grab the D. Okay, so here's the chord chart, and you just play in the A, and then you put your pinky down, and that's your A sus4 chord. Okay. All right, very straightforward, just like we did with the D chord. Pop our pinky down 1 fret higher, and we've got the chord. Same thing with the sus2 chord, okay? So in the key of A, the 2 is a B, right? A, go up a whole step to B, right? So we want A, B, and E. That's our sus chord, all right? Our sus2 chord, sorry. And so how do we get that? Well, same way we did with the D. Our B string, that's the note we want. If it's open, then we're getting a B, right? That's the note we tune this string to, all right? And so going from the A major chord, where we have the 1, 2, 3 across, we just pick that one up, and then we just got the 2 fingers down. And there's the A sus2 chord, okay? And the same logic applies to using them together. Same thing, okay? So now we've got A sus2 and A sus4 down. You can do it with the version that you are playing, if you're playing your A with just 1 finger across 2. You still need to pick up that same note there, and you can do it either with your ring finger, or you can do it with your pinky. Okay, so same deal as you have when you're playing with 1 finger. Okay, let me do also the E sus4, the E sus4, okay? You will recall our E chord looks like this. And the triad in a the major triad, the major chord in the key of E is E, G sharp, and B. E, G sharp, and B, okay? And so what we need to do is drop out the G sharp and add, what? What do we add? A half step up, right? And that's easy to do in the E chord as well. You've got your fingers in this position. And you're just going to put your pinky down on your G string to raise it from being a G sharp to being an A. Right? So you're basically doing a little 3-bar there across those strings. And then you just open it back up. You can leave your index finger down when you're doing that. Okay, and that's the E sus4 chord. All right. Now, I'm going to skip some of the sus chords because they're not very commonly used and they're a little bit different in various ways. And so the E sus2 chord isn't actually that hard to play, but I'm trying to keep you focused on things you're actually going to need for GarageBand guitar playing, okay? And I can only remember a couple of times, a couple of songs that use that E sus2 chord. So I'm going to skip it. If you really need it, well, I'll show you a different way to get at it in just a second, because we're going to now talk about the bar chord forms of the sus2 and the sus4 chords, okay? Now remember, our two main bar chord forms are using that A form, right? And our E form. Okay, and so what we just learned about the A sus2 and sus4 and the E sus4 apply the same way as extensions of the E form and the A form bar chords. Okay, so let me do a C sus4 first of all. Okay, C sus4, and if we're playing A down here, then this bar chord is B. This one's C. C on the 3rd fret, okay? So I'm just sliding an A up and using my finger as the nut. And I got a C here, okay? That's what it looks like on the chord chart. And remember, to get the sus4, we just took our pinky and added it on 1 fret higher on the B string. And we'll do the exact same thing here with C, with this bar chord. So I'm just going to put my pinky right down there on my B string, and I'm going to get the sus4 chord. That's how you use the bar chord, the A form bar chord, to get the sus4 chord. All right, so this is the C sus4. D. Okay, and so you can slide that around just like you did your bar chords. All right. To get the sus2, let's see the C sus2. All we did was open that string up down to the nut. Remember, with our A. Okay, and so we just do the same thing up here. We open up that B string down to the nut that we moved, our finger, our bar. Okay, and so we have this chord form right here. That's a C sus2 played in a bar form, okay? You can use the E form one to get the sus4 pretty easily too. So this is a G bar chord, right? So I've moved the E form up to the 3rd fret, and that's a G chord. That's a G bar chord. All right, and remember, all I did to get the sus4 was I took the G string and I just moved up a fret. So I'm moving up right above my middle finger, my 2 finger. I'm going up 1 fret above that to get the note that I need, okay? That's the note I need. And I can do that by just barring across those 3 strings with my ring finger. So it's kind of like the C bar chord, but it's just over 1 set of strings. And that gives me the A sus4. I mean, not A, the G sus4. There it is. So now you've got a sus4 form here with the E form, and you can move that around, slide that around, right? A sus4, B sus4, okay? And so there you have a whole bunch of sus chords that you've picked up with those bar chord forms, okay? All right, I want to do one more sus4 and sus2 chords, and this is where that muting comes in, okay? And we're going to do it by taking a look at the G sus4 and the G sus2. Now, you can play them up here with your bar forms, but I wanted to show you the open chord form down here. So let's remember our G chord, which you probably have down pat right now. Okay, looks like this, it's fingered like this. And if I put my little chart up here again, I could see that a G chord is made up of what? G is the root, then B is the 3rd, and D is the 5th, okay? So the B is the one I gotta sub out and put something else in there, okay? If I'm doing a sus4, the note I need is a C, right? Okay, so where can I get a C on my neck here? All right, where can I get a C that's down here that I can reach? Well, there's a couple of them, but like some of the other chords we talked about earlier, you don't want to get one that's too low. It gets muddy sounding with the rest of the chord, okay? So let's find a pretty high C that we can deal with here, okay? And one place there is one is on your B string, the second highest string, on the 1st fret. So B up a half step, that's a C right there. So we want to get that in to our G chord, okay? So what we do is we're in our regular G chord position, and we take our index finger and reach over and press down that 1st fret of the B string. Now that's quite a stretch, and it might take you a little bit of work and practice to get used to doing that, because that's a good reach across there. But it's not too hard if you just do it a few times. I think you'll start to feel that one pop in pretty easily, okay? Now remember that we had to get rid of all of our B's when we do that. And we did by doing that, okay? Because we picked up where this is a B we're playing on the A string, and we're going away from that and moving our finger to use it somewhere else. And then when we put the C down over here, we got rid of the open B and replaced it with a C like that. Now the only problem is something else happened when we picked up our finger over here. What happened was, now this string is open, and it's an A, and there ain't no A in a G sus4 chord, all right? So we got to do something about this string down here. What are we going to do about it? Well, that's where the muting comes in, okay? So we want to somehow touch that string so it doesn't play when we're doing the rest of this chord. Okay, and how can we do that? Well, it almost happens automatically with this chord because of the stretch that you're making over here. Your middle finger, your number 2 finger, almost automatically leans against the A string and stops it from ringing. So I got my B playing down here, and that same finger is blocking that A string from playing, okay? And that's exactly what we want to happen, is we want us to get that C over there, and we want to block that A string from playing. And so that muting gives us exactly what we want. Ta-da! Okay, so that's the G sus4 chord in the open position down here. Okay, how about the sus2? Okay, well, back to our little chart here. What note do we need to get in here? Well, we're in G, and so the second, the major second, is an A, right? It's up one step, one full step from G. All right, so G, A. So we want to get an A in there somehow. And again, there's a couple of A's that we could get, but we want a high one. Okay, we don't want a low one. It doesn't sound as good when we do that. So we can do that on our G string, on this string, G, A, 2 frets up. That's an A note, right? G, A, okay? And so how to get that? Well, we just, again, pick up our index finger, our number 1 finger, and we put it down on the G string on the 2nd fret, okay? And we've got our A note, all right? But we still got to get rid of our B's, okay? And we haven't done that yet. The first one we did, okay, because we picked up our finger. And that actually opened us up to an A. And you can play that one when you're playing these chords. But again, I don't recommend that because when you play that sus2 note down low like that, it gets muddy and it just mixes in with the other notes in a way that's not as pleasing. And so once again, you can use your middle finger to mute that A string just like we did on the G sus4 chord. We'll do the same thing and mute that string on the G sus2 chord. But we still got another B that we got to deal with, and that's our B string is still ringing open over here, right? On the G sus4 chord, we replaced the C on that string, so we got rid of the B. But this time we're not on that string, we're on the G string, and so that B note is still going to play when we strum across the guitar. So once again, what do we get to do? We get to mute it, okay? And it's easy to mute because you've got your index finger right there on the G string, and you just let it lean on the B string a little bit, just like you're doing down here on the A string, and it stops it from playing. And so this is a chord where in the chord chart we have 2 X's up there that are in the middle of the chord, and it seems like it's really complicated, but because of the way your fingers are kind of naturally in this chord, it's really easy to mute the strings that you need to mute. Okay, so we're muting the A string and the B string to get this chord. Okay, so here's the G sus2 chord. Okay, that's about it. Now, there's other ones I didn't cover, and I'm not going to. I mean, I'll tell you quickly why. And I'll do it by talking briefly about the C chord. You already know the C chord. In the C chord, you'd have to get rid of the E. C, E, G. It's the E that you got to get rid of. And why is that such a big deal with the C chord? Well, it's because there's 3 E's in the G chord, okay? So you've got the low one, you've got the one in the middle, and then you've got the high one. And you've got to get rid of all of those when you do the suspension because that's the note you're getting rid of. That's the 3rd. And it's not particularly easy to do that. And quite frankly, nobody does it. Okay, that's just not how it happens. You are unlikely to run across that. If you get a C, sus2 or sus4 anyhow, play it with the bar chord form up here. You'll get the same thing you need, but it's just a lot easier to manage with this bar chord form because there's only 1 E in that version of the C chord. All right, so you just have to deal with the E that's on the B string. Okay, so use the bar chord form if they ask you for a C sus2 or a C sus4. All right, that's it. The last thing I'll just mention, and it's just something to be aware of, and again, not something you should try to learn right now at all. Trying to keep these things compact so you're getting what you need without a lot of extra. But you can combine the sus chord with other kinds of chords. Okay, so in any case, you can substitute out the 3rd in some other chord, and you can have a sus version of that chord. A good example is with the 7th. Okay, so if you're playing a 7th chord, you could, that has the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th in it. A dominant 7th, for example, okay? And so you could just substitute out for the 3rd in that 1, 3, 5, 7 series, swap out the 3rd for the 4th, and you can have a 7th sus4 chord, okay? So you can put them together like that and get interesting kinds of sounds. So like an A 7th sus4. Now, again, I'm not going to teach you that because it's rare that you would need to use that, particularly in this kind of music, but I just want you to be aware of that possibility. That can be part of how this works as well. All right, that's it for the sus chords. So download that chart and practice it up a little bit, and I will find some songs that have some really good prominent sus4 and sus2 chords in it, so you can play along with those songs as well. That's it for now. The next lesson after songs is power chords, and it's a really important, interesting part of guitar playing, particularly if you're going to play rock music, have any kind of distortion on your guitar. It's very, very important, and I can't wait to show you how to do that. They're super handy kinds of chords, and they do all kinds of great work for you in lots of different situations. So that'll be the next lesson.